giving back to the community. And we all benefit from it, right? We all read papers written by various authors and we have benefited from it. So it is just this one way of giving back to the community. It also helps to build a peer network of like-minded individuals who are, or researchers who are interested in the same area of research. You kind of build a peer network with them, right? And obviously, this is going to be very, very enriching and rewarding for both parties. You know, the person who is writing as well as the person who's reading, right? It builds that connect. Okay. There are other researchers who can benefit from your research, the kind of work that you've done. I'm sure all of us during the course of our research make mistakes. We obviously present them so others can learn from the mistakes and not really make them. And again, we have also benefited from other people's mistakes and we have taken advantage of it. And therefore, this sharing back to the community definitely helps. And it also helps other researchers take advantage of whatever findings you have done and build on top of that so that this advances the overall research area to further limits. Okay. And obviously, you know, when you write a research paper, it helps you to, in addition to building the network, it helps you to provide you an opportunity to collaborate with other researchers who are in same area of work. Okay. So when you collaborate with like-minded individuals, obviously the outcome is going to be much better and overall research quality will improve. And that's one of the reasons why you want to write. And of course, last but not the least, as an individual, you always want to be recognized for an expert, as an expert in one or two more areas. And that is where writing research papers in a particular area will help you to get that recognition. So these are all the motivations for writing a research paper. Okay. Now, many times when I have given this talk, this question has come up. So I thought, you know, it would be good to just bring this up. So how does one pick a research topic? And this especially comes from the undergrad students. Right? So how do you find a good research topic? Right? One way to look at it is it should definitely be an area of your passion. Right? If it is not in your area of passion, it's going to be difficult for you to really contribute to the research because when it is part of your area of passion, obviously you go that extra mile. Otherwise, it's going to be like a chore and you typically don't end up doing that extra work that is needed to get you to beyond the limits of the active research that is happening. Okay. And when you pick a research topic, it should be an area of active research. Why? When there is active research going on, it also helps to motivate you. When you see other researchers doing good work, you read about their work, you collaborate with them. It helps to motivate and it also eventually accelerates the work. And how do you go about finding this? You look at, you know, if you have identified an area, you go look for top colleges that are working on that in that same area, and then you find research groups that are working in it. You collaborate with them, you reach out to them, interact with them, and then you are able to build a topic that is of interest, okay? A specific topic. And last but not the least, today with you know, the ability to go and find all the information is available at your fingertips, thanks to the internet. You can go and read up the latest research publications. You can attend talks. You can do a lot of things to, you know, understand what is happening in that area, so that it gives you some ideas of what you could really focus on. So potential focus areas can be identified. So this is how you go about picking the research topic. Again, whatever I'm saying here, I'm sure you all do it. It's just a kind of capturing all of it in a nugget. Okay. Now let's get to the process of writing. So let's say you've identified your area, you've done some good research work. Now you want to start writing about it, right? So when you start writing about it, the first question that comes up is, who are you really writing the paper for? Sometimes you write the paper for a layman audience. So it could be in a magazine or a trade journal or something like that, which is read not by the advanced researcher, but by the layman who is not necessarily familiar with the topic. Right? So the tone that you write with, the kind of the way in which you express your ideas will be different when you write to a layman kind of, when the reader is a layman. On the other hand, if the reader is going to be a very experienced researcher in the same area, then the way you write your paper would be very, very different. Okay? So that's the first thing. But irrespective of who the reader is, at the end of the day, you have to tell a story. When you tell a story, it helps to keep the reader engaged from the beginning to the end. I'm sure you have read a lot of research papers, and you also find that there are certain papers that keep you engrossed. There are certain papers that put you to sleep very quickly, right? So if that is the case, so how do you really tell a story to keep the reader engaged from start to end is going to be the key to writing a good research paper, right? Of course, you don't have too much flexibility in terms of the structure, because when you try to publish a research paper, whether it is a conference publication or a journal publication, the structure is reasonably well defined. So within that structure, how you can bring in that ability to tell a story is what your creativity is all about. Okay. So you have to have a title, abstract, introduction. This is a structure that typically any publication would kind of request you to publish along. And based on this, what kind of creativity that you can bring. And it's my firm belief that writing, despite all the limitations and constraints, writing a research paper is an art, and it can definitely be learned with practice. Okay? And I can vouch for myself. When I started out, how I used to write versus when I started writing more and more, how my overall writing improved. Okay? So definitely something that one can learn with practice. Okay. So first question that comes up when we talk about, okay, when you say write a good research paper, right? So let's try to define what is a good research paper. Right? So what a good research paper does is basically it kind of outlines the problem. What is the problem that is being addressed in the paper, right? It kind of gives a context. Again, the reader, while even if he's an experienced researcher, may not necessarily be aware of everything that has happened in that context of the problem. So it's good to just highlight what other researchers have contributed towards that problem, and the solution that you have come up with, the research work that you have done, and how it is better or more advanced than what others have already done, right? So what is the new contribution that you're making, right? And last but not the least, the results that have been achieved. So if you kind of structure your paper that addresses all these four aspects, obviously it becomes a good research paper. So how do you kind of say, what is your contribution, and how do you identify that, and how do you describe it so that the reader feels that, yes, there is significant value that has come out from this paper? Is that you kind of say that, okay, yeah, of course, I'm kind of talking about it more from computer science, but I'm sure it must be the same thing in the PES space as well. Okay, how do you, it could be a design of a new algorithm, a new design, could be hardware, software, whatever, but it has to be something very, very different from what other researchers have done. Many a times you do see publications where the research work is marginal. Okay, the additional most work has already been done by other researchers, and the contribution is marginal. The contribution is marginal. It doesn't really add a whole lot of value. Okay, then it doesn't constitute what we would term as a good research. Does it get published? Yes, there are many publications will publish it, but if you want to be, get credit for it being a good research paper, then whatever you're adding should be significantly different from what other researchers have done. Yeah? Sometimes the research paper may not be anything new, but it could be something like a performance evaluation. So you just take a well-defined methodology, or well-defined, you build experiments around it, do a good performance answer, you run a lot of simulations, you take a lot of measurements. You could do that kind of work and still be considered a very good research paper, provided that number of that analysis that you've done, simulations or measurements, is significant. Last but not the least, it may not be anything designed. It may just be a completely new theory or a hypothesis based on certain, leap of faith, so to speak. But then it has to be substantiated with all the evidential proofs. Okay, and that's also possible in terms of a research paper. Okay? So this is what constitutes a new research paper. Continuing further, so to summarize, what we're saying is, objective of the paper should be you detail the problem, explain the context of the problem, right? You describe what your results are in sufficient detail so that others can establish that, yes, these results are indeed valid. Many times you see that, people don't spend enough time on writing about the results in sufficient detail. So then it becomes a question mark, did the person really do those experiments? Did those results really, are they really valid? Did they really achieve those results? Questions start coming into the reader's mind, which is not a good idea. Okay. You want to convince the reader that yes, the results are indeed correct, and they go into sufficient detail. So in case the researcher wants to replicate the results, they should be able to do it. Okay. More important is identifying any non-obvious findings. Many a times people just draw a graph which is a straight line and say, A is directly proportional to B. That is very obvious from the graph, right? So what is non-obvious or non-intuitive is something that has to be called out very explicitly. Okay. And last but not the least, whatever work you've done, there is a significance, right? Whether it's some improvements to the current work or the impact that it has on other work and so on. That significance has to be outlined. Okay. If you are able to achieve all this, automatically the paper becomes classified as a good research paper. Okay. When you publish a paper, you also want, one of the motives is that the paper should be widely referenced, okay? Because there's a lot of credit that you get when people refer to your work, right? To be able to do that, you have to provide a path for other researchers to use your work, right? That's why you kind of outline what lessons you learned so that others can benefit from it. They can build on top of it. You detail the work that you've done so that others can replicate your work and then build on top of it. So when they replicate your work, automatically they will give reference to your work. So your paper becomes widely referenced. And more important is, obviously this paper is never complete. There is enough areas that others can work on. So if you give pointers to what additional work can be done, that becomes an additional insight. And people who read your work will automatically reference your work when they do that additional. Okay. So these are the ways in which you can get your paper to be widely referenced. So again, a paper that is very widely referenced typically gets classified as a good research paper. So now that we've kind of understood what a good research paper is, let's now talk about how to go about writing. Before I go there, are there any questions, comments, anything that you would want me to kind of address?
Participants can unmute and ask.
Yeah, you can just unmute and ask. It might be easier.
Any questions or queries regarding your doubts?
So if there are no questions, let me move on.
Yeah.
All right. So the first thing in a paper is the title. Okay. That is what every reader will first read. Right? So the title has to be very, very catchy, right? Many times people write very long titles. If you write a very long title, it becomes difficult to really see what you're trying to say. Okay? So the title has to be brief. And of course, many publications also have a limitation on how many words. So it has to be brief. At the same time, it has to be describing the research. Don't just say, hey, this is a paper about, whatever, power systems or whatever it is, right? It doesn't make a whole lot of, it doesn't make it exciting. Obviously, if you're going to publish in a journal that is focused on power systems, and if you just say new work done in power systems, it doesn't make very exciting to kind of say what exactly the work is all about, right? The other thing that people do is they put in a lot of these superfluous words. So they say, oh, best algorithm or best work or new work. Obviously, it is new work, right? I mean, these are superfluous in the sense that you know that if you're trying to get it published, obviously the work that you've done is new, right? So putting in these superfluous work doesn't really help. It takes away one word that you've used, but doesn't give you additional, benefit of, keeping the title very exciting. Okay. Very important is that the adjectives that you use in the title should be representative of the work done. And we'll kind of talk about, how to go about writing the title as well. Okay, I'll spend some time on that. Yeah. And it's very important that you have to have a fine balance between being very specific or specific. Okay. The reason you have to be specific is so people understand what you've done. At the same time, if you go very, very specific, then people lose interest because they know exactly what you've done and they may not read the entire paper. So you want to kind of have a fine balance between what you want to say and without going into too much detail so that the excitement remains. That's how you kind of excite the reader to read through your paper. Okay. So how do you choose title? Some of the tips. Obviously, you have to provide some hints about what the content of the research paper is. So you have to kind of say, hey, this is what the paper is all about. As far as possible, you try to give some hints. Okay, this is some work done. I'm sorry, I don't have much insight of what research happens in power systems, so I'll keep my thoughts to limit it to, giving generic hints. But yeah, what the paper is about, you should try to give some hints around it. Make it interesting. So why should the reader really go through the entire paper once they've read the title, right? You must find something exciting. You must reflect the tone of the writing. When I say tone of the writing, what I mean is if you're writing it for a layman audience, keep the title very basic, which a layman can understand. If you're writing it for a research publication, which is going to be read by researchers, keep the tone a little bit more appropriate to the audience that is going to read, right? And last but not the least is capture as many keywords as you can, because eventually for your paper to be widely referenced, the keywords should show up when you do a search, when somebody searches for the paper in that area. Okay. So if you keep these four things in mind, you'll be able to at least write a reasonable title. So let's see some examples. Again, since I didn't want to make it very technical here, I said, okay, let's look at movies. Right? We all watch movies. So look at this title. Very, very short, but you know exactly what this movie is about, right? And obviously it excites you to go. If you're a fan of that genre of comedy movies, you'll probably want to go and see them, right? That's what it excites you about. So the title has been chosen in such a way, it is short, crisp, kind of talks about what it is all about, not in detail, but enough specificity is there to kind of want the viewer to go and view the movie, go and watch them. Okay. Take another one. Obviously, these are going to be very contrasting. The second movie is not going to be the same as the first one, right? Fans of the, adventure thriller kind of fans, would want to watch the second movie. People who love comedy movies would want to watch the first one, right? It's very obvious. In some sense, just with 2, 3, 4 words, the title kind of gives you a reasonable hint about what is going to be something that you can expect in the movie and generate an interest, and also to kind of highlight, okay, what this is all about, right? To some extent. Okay. So that's what title is about. Okay. So you have to be extremely creative in creating the title, of course. But then again, how do you go about it? Let's look at some of the steps to follow. So questions are, if you before you write the title, kind of start asking these basic questions. First, you ask the question, okay, why are you really writing this paper, right? What is it that you have done that you're going to describe in the paper? So what is this paper about? Is it experimental work? Is it a mathematical work? Is it simulation? Is it proof? What have you really done, right? That's the first thing to kind of look at. So that you describe that. You remember what I said, right? Be specific, not very specific, but to bring in that little bit of specificity, you need to be able to kind of highlight this. Okay. Based on the above, you kind of create a list of keywords. It can be long, create as many keywords and phrases that you think it is, right? And put all of these keywords together to create a long sentence. Remember, title is only one sentence, right? Not even a sentence, it's a phrase. So you just have a limitation of putting all these things into one single phrase or a sentence. So you create that long sentence. Don't worry about the length at this point in time. Even though the journal or the publication that you're going to send it to may have a limitation of 10 or 15 words, for the first time, don't worry about it. Just write it. After you write the sentence that describes your work, make sure that it really describes your work in one sentence. Then you start removing all the redundant words. Once you remove the redundant words, you get a working title. Once you've got the working title, then you can start looking at, okay, are there different ways to kind of position the words, maybe use different words somewhere here or there, and then try to make it interesting. So if you follow these steps, right, you typically arrive at a reasonably good working title that suffices for most publications. Exciting enough, specific enough, not very specific, at the same time giving a good idea of what this work is all about, and also has all the keywords that will show up in a keyword search. Okay. So of course you have to meet the 10 to 15 word limits. So when do you really write the title? My suggestion would be, don't write the title in the beginning. First you write your entire paper, everything. Once you're completed writing the paper, then you can kind of ask these questions and arrive at the title. Okay. So arriving at the title before you have written the paper usually doesn't tell you, exactly what it is. So best is to write the title after you've done all the work. Okay. Any questions before I move forward?
Participants, if you can any doubts or queries, you can unmute and ask, please. Or otherwise, you can write in chat box.
Yeah.
Go ahead, sir.
Okay. All right. Let me. So let's look at one or two examples, right? So again, I've taken a topic that most people, it's nothing related to any of the work that we do, right? Say you're writing to about stars, and you've done some research about why stars twinkle, right? Now, if you're going to write to a layman magazine, so this title could be very simple: Why do stars twinkle? Right? And of course, you'll go and write about why these two twinkle in layman language, but by and large, the title is just going to say a very, very simple thing: Why do stars twinkle? On the other hand, say you've done the same work, but you're now going to submit it to a journal or a publication that is focused on astronomy, which is focusing on how stars work and how they twinkle and so on and so forth. Now you've done your work. Now you don't want to then say why do stars twinkle, right? Because that sounds very childish in a very prestigious journal where researchers are reading it who already know the basics of why stars. So you may want to use the jargon that is relevant in that research community that brings in, why you are, seen as one of the researchers who kind of understand the jargon. I know it sounds very, very ostentatious when you put the jargon like this, but in a research kind of an environment, this is probably the right way to keep the audience attracted. If you say, why do stars twinkle? And in a journal paper, the reader would probably not be very thrilled to go and read the paper. So this is the right way to probably highlight it. Or maybe you can even shorten it somewhere and talk about stellar scintillation, which is again the right word for why stars twinkle. But then again, this is a way to kind of bring it. Okay? So you can see basically the contrast between looking at the audience, the reader. You can kind of decide what kind of a title you would want to choose for your article. And that's why when you choose the title after you've written the paper, you'll be able to bring in all these aspects while selecting the title for your article. Okay. Now, the next part, once you've written the title, is the abstract. So what is an abstract? An abstract is a summary of the paper, right? So what should the abstract do? And you have a word limitation usually, again, 150, 200 words. So in 150 to 200 words, you should be able to convey the problem statement and its context. Okay. Remember, when people get to see a paper, the first thing they read is the title. The very next thing they read is the abstract to kind of see what is this about. Okay. So the abstract should therefore convey the problem statement, the context, give a brief context, and talk about the result that has been achieved in the paper. Okay. That's what excites the reader to continue reading. So if you say, hey, you know what, you have figured out a way to do, say some measurements in a much better way, or you've got something which is far better than what others have done, kind of bring that into the abstract to excite the reader. So it's like an abstract of, abstract is like a movie trailer. Why would you go and watch a movie? If you find the trailer intriguing. Trailer, it's a 15 seconds, 30 seconds, 42 seconds, maybe a very short clip for a 2 hour, 3 hour movie, but just by watching the trailer, people feel excited to go and watch the movie, right? So that's what an abstract is all about. Once you write a good abstract, people would want to read the paper to see, hey, this abstract is so exciting. Let me read what the researcher has done, right? So it must really grab attention and make a very good first impression. And that's the objective of the abstract. Yeah? So if you can figure out a way to do that, and again, we'll talk about some tips about how to go about writing an abstract. This is what is the objective of the abstract. Right? And of course, you do have constraints. You will have 150, 200 word limit, just like a movie trailer. You don't want to have a trailer which is 20 minutes long, right? A trailer should be 15 seconds, 1 minute max to capture the attention and then excite the audience enough to go and watch the movie. Okay. So let's take two examples here, and I will leave it on the screen for some time for you to read. See the left side and the right side. Okay, don't worry about what the topic is. Just read the left side, read the right side, and then let us see what is the example. Why, whether one is right, the right one or the left one. What would you feel about it? Okay, maybe you can have a little bit of a discussion around this. Okay. So remember, the title for both are the same. It is talking about some concept of a neural network, something called fuzzy logic, and it is talking about intrusion detection, something related to security, right? Both the titles are the same, the left abstract and the right abstract. So what is happening on the left abstract? You know, anybody wants to comment on this? What does the left abstract say? What does the right abstract say? And which one would you prefer or choose or not choose? Any thoughts? So let's look at the left abstract. What the left abstract is saying is it's a very, very high level statement, right? It is not giving enough information to see what really the researchers have done. All that says is in our work, we have used a novel type of neural network, something, and they believe that it can substantially improve. While they have used the word substantially improve, they're not really quantified it. They're not given any data points to say that, okay, what is the improvement that they have achieved? So it's a very high level statement, looks good, but it is not exciting enough to say, hey, have these guys really done something interesting? Let's take the right side. The right side, on the other hand, they've gone into very, very detailed description of what they have done. They have looked at, what kind of training material they use, what kind of algorithms they use, what was the data size, 3,200 vectors, what kind of classifiers they used, and the kind of results they got, right? 34% better. So they have described the work in so much detail, right? Now, after reading this, an experienced researcher would know exactly what they have done and may not go about reading the paper at all. Right? Again, just like the title, the abstract should also have enough to excite the reader, at the same time not be so specific that it would the reader would not really go and read the entire thing. Okay, so some balance between the two, wherein you take some points from the right side and add it to the left side to make it brings in a little bit of specificity without really revealing the entire plot. Okay. Think about it. If you go and watch a movie trailer and the entire plot of the movie is revealed in the trailer, why would you go and watch the movie? Right? You go and watch the movie because it is intriguing. There is something left unsaid, and that's what you need to have. Okay. So coming back here, what do you want to do in the abstract? Yes, you want to provide a context. You want to talk about your work. If it is a publication in a reputed journal or a conference, you want to use the right terminology. Don't use vague terms. Make it very specific. Say what you're exactly doing. And last but not the least, stay within the specified word limit. Many publications frown at researchers who write long abstracts. So if they say 150 to 200 words, try to stay within that limit. Okay? What you should try to avoid ambiguity. Don't keep it ambiguous. Be very clear what you're going to say, what you're going to do, or what you have done, rather. Right? Don't make highly motivational statements. Right? Okay, this work is in the area of, I don't know, Atmanirbhar Bharat or whatever. Right? I'm sure there must be a lot of work that we do might be very, very motivational. But if you want to do something, be very specific. Don't have, high motivational statements there. Right? And usually it's not a good idea to have mathematical equations or references in the abstract. Yeah, you have the rest of the paper to bring up all those things. So in the abstract, try to avoid. And last but not the least, like the example we saw on the right side, avoid too many details. The more details you put, it's like giving away the plot of the movie in the trailer itself, and people will not go and watch the movie. So similarly, people will not read the paper. Okay. Just like the title, after you have written all the entire paper, then you come and summarize what you've written as part of the abstract. Okay. Any questions here before I move on?
Yes, sir. Few questions are there.
Yeah.
I think the first question is from Suman Sharma about the title section that you specified.
Yeah.
Suman asked for some few examples of titles. I think they want how to establish that catchy titles with an
Yeah.
example, few examples.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, I don't know enough about your research area to say what is catchy. But see, look at it this way. I'm sure you, when you go to, you open, I don't know what is the most popular or very well reputed journal or conference in your area. Pick up any conference proceedings, right? Just go through the titles of that. Which one excites you? See, I know that excitement or whatever is a little bit subjective. Okay, so I can't kind of give a very specific example of what it should be. That's why I was trying to use movie as a synonym or as an analogy for identity, right? I'm sure you have come across movie titles which don't tell you what the movie is all about, right? You wouldn't want to go, or you may not even want to go and see a movie just because the title is very uninspiring, right? Just like that. Title has to be very catchy. I mean, I know, like I said, there are a few steps that one can follow, and you will arrive at something which is okay. And just check it with, you can always check your title with somebody who's not very well versed. Ask them, if they read a title like this, what would be their reaction, right? You can get some feedback from people as well. Yeah. But by and large, if you follow the steps of, what work you have done, write, what are the keywords associated with it? Write a long sentence that describes your work. Cut out all the extra words and arrive at a title which is, within that 10 to 15 words. You will most likely take away all the superfluous words and stuff like that. You will most likely have something which is reasonably descriptive and catchy enough for the reader to read the page. Again, we are not expecting, play with the words, puns, and English, showing command of English language and other things. We are not talking about. We're just talking about titles that are really exciting. Even when you pick up books, right? Certain books you feel like reading, certain books you don't. Why is that? Most of the time, it is the title. So that's what it's all about. Again, I'm not saying that I may not be able to give you all kinds of examples, but definitely, in your area, if you pick a most recent journal or whatever, go through the titles, see which one interests you and which one doesn't, and you will be able to kind of figure out, what is so unique about it. Okay. All I'm giving you pointers right now is to keep in mind, so that when you read the next paper, keep in mind, hey, how did this person, the researcher, really come up with the title? What was so interesting about it? Give it a thought, and you'll automatically, you'll start improving your titles. Okay. Sorry, Suman, I was not able to give you better than an example, but hope this helps.
Another question, sir, from Rahul Pandey, but I
Yeah.
didn't understand that. We can move with the same area within MTech, or it's maybe changed. Uh, I don't understand what he is.
So okay, I think what Rahul is asking is whether the MTech work that you're doing can continue to become a PhD area, or you can change
Or
the topic,
something,
right?
something like that. Yeah.
Is that the question? I'm assuming, Rahul, that's what you're asking.
Is Rahul is there?
Rahul, I'm
Yes,
having a,
sir. Good
yeah,
evening, sir. Good
yeah,
evening,
hi,
sir.
Rahul. Is that the question,
Sir,
Rahul?
I just want to know that age. Hello.
Yeah,
Can you
Rahul,
can
please. Yeah, please, Rahul.
Hello.
Yeah, no, I don't think I got it. So let me just assume that that is your question. So you can just answer me yes or no. So Rahul, is that the question that, the area that you're working for your MTech, whether you can continue the same or you can choose a different area for your PhD? Is that what you're asking? No.
I think he's lost the connection, sir.
Oh, you lost the
Uh,
connection. Okay, we'll come back
maybe,
to that later, the next call.
okay,
Are there
okay.
any other questions?
Yes, sir.
Yeah,
On Mr. Saurav Day asked about should the abstract be written in active or passive voice? Is there any restrictions regarding that?
good question. So I have a topic about that. So see, in about 20 years back or before that, people used to write most of the abstracts and everything. In fact, the entire paper used to be written in passive voice. But nowadays it's a fashion to write a lot of things in active voice. So the current trend is to write in active voice. So it would be preferable to write in active voice. Having said that, if you have a better flair of writing in passive, then please do. The general this thing is passive voice tends to be longer sentences, and it brings in an impersonality, level of impersonality which you don't want to kind of bring in. You want to make it very personal. Then writing in active voice helps. Again, this is my personal opinion. again, you read when you go through some good papers, right? You see that authors using active voice, you typically tend to like them because they would be shorter, crisper sentences. You'll feel a connect with the writer.
And thank you, sir. And one more question is there.
Yeah.
How to write abstract in less words clearly? Yeah. Okay. Thanks for the nice insights. And another question is:
let me come back to that as well. Yeah.
Is it mandatory to use data sets in abstract? Because I think so. In that second abstract, the right side abstract, there are some numbers.
Correct. Yeah. So usually try not to reveal the entire plot. So let's see how to go about it, right? Again, when you've written your paper, so that's why the general advice is that you write your abstract after you have written the paper, right? So in the paper, you have an introduction and you have a conclusion section, right? That tells you what is your problem statement and what you have achieved. So take these two. That tells you all the findings that you've done in the introduction and conclusion. That gives you the objective or the hypothesis, right? Your main contribution will therefore come from these two primarily and the results. So these are the 4 things that you need to pick. So what is the problem statement? What have you concluded? What was your contribution and what were your results? Experimental results you have done that, right? Don't have to reveal too many things saying that, okay, I use data sets. So the question was, should we reveal all the data sets? Probably not in an abstract. But because anyway, when you describe your paper, in your paper, you'll be talking about, what data sets you use, what kind of results you achieve. So unless the results have a context to the data set, you may not want to kind of highlight it. You can just say that, we used a variety of data sets and we got 10% better results than the researchers working in this area, something like that, right? That kind of highlights your result. So all these needs to be captured in as far as possible in that abstract. Okay. So you take the introduction, conclusion, contribution, results, you combine all of it, create as big a paragraph. Don't worry about the word limit at this point in time. When you write the abstract first cut, don't worry about the 100, 150 word or 200 words limit. Okay. Once you have written all this, then you start removing paragraphs that do not contain things that are not in the paper. See, many times what happens is people write things in the abstract, but they don't describe that in the paper. So if there is anything that is not in the paper, you should kind of remove that. Okay. On the key contribution, if you're writing unnecessarily details, usually that's what I was talking about in the data set. Right? Usually you don't want to reveal the entire plot. So don't talk about everything. Try to keep only the contribution in. Okay. And try not to bring in other literatures, other references and all that in the abstract. You can just say your result is 10% better than other researchers' work. You don't have to highlight which researcher or what reference and so on. Unless that is a very, very famous reference that everybody knows, maybe you can talk about it. But by and large, you can avoid. Okay. Once you get all of this, make sure that if it is still not within the word, try to remove any extra information and slowly you cut it to your word limit. Okay. So the best idea would be, a good idea is take all this information, introduction, conclusion, contribution, results, write all of it in a large paragraph, probably exceeding 200 words, and start cutting things which are not necessary. So it's like a sculpture, right? You have a block of stone and you take away what you don't need and you'll arrive at a beautiful sculpture. It's exactly like that. Take a large paragraph, take away whatever you don't think is relevant, and you'll arrive at an abstract within the required 150 to 200 words, and you will have your abstract. Okay. But most important thing is what you say in the abstract and what you're saying in the paper must be consistent. I have seen many publications when I review papers where people say something in the abstract and it is nowhere seen in the paper. Okay. And that is absolutely no. You may make a claim in the abstract, say, oh, I did something, whatever, and then the paper doesn't even talk about it. So try to avoid that. That's why it's a good idea to write the abstract from whatever you have already written in the paper so that consistency is
And one more thing, sir, in my personal doubts,
Yeah.
when I write an abstract, always striking that when we start with a background sentence or this paper proposes something.
Correct.
Yeah, I have a little bit confusion on that. When we going to start the background of the work
Yes.
with the one
Yes.
sentence, or otherwise start with this paper proposes something.
No, it might be a good idea to talk a little. That's why I said, whatever you write in your introduction, right? In an introduction, typically what you do is you talk a little bit about the problem, right?
Yes.
Which is the background for the work. So you can say, for example, if you're writing a paper about, again, I'm just talking about, stars twinkling here, so that I don't get into a specific research, right?
Yes.
If you're talking about why stars twinkle, you may want to say, it has been observed that, or researchers have been working on this area of stars twinkling, or whatever it is, right? Or you kind of give an introduction to what problem you're solving. And then you can talk more about your specific work, saying, okay, how did you measure? If you're talking about stars, you say, okay, stars which are within this particular distance twinkle more than stars which are further away, whatever work you've done. Then you can start talking about that and your results will follow. So if you follow this pattern, more likely that you will get a reasonably good abstract that kind of represents what your paper is all about. It's a good summary of the paper. Again, these are just guidelines. I'm not there's nothing is hard and fast here. When you write the next paper or when you read a paper, you kind of see, are they following the structure? Do you like it? And if you like that, people have followed the structure and you like it, like the paper, then you want to kind of emulate that when you write your paper as
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Yeah, the questions are awesome.
well. All right. Okay. So now, once you've finished the abstract, now the next section is the introduction. Again, people, whoever reads the paper, first they read the title, they read the abstract, and then the very first section is the introduction. Introduction, you don't have any word limit usually, right? You can write a reasonably long introduction. So there you can talk about the problem being addressed. Again, how far into the basic of the problem you want to describe will depend on how much work is there. If the work is, people have been working in this area for 15, 20 years, you don't want to go back and say way back in 1990, this is what was happening and so on. And you may want to keep it more the last 3-4 years, what has been happening. So the problem being addressed has to be very well defined in the introduction, because that gives an idea to the reader what this whole paper is about. Okay. So you have to give the context. And why the context is important is because the reader may not necessarily be familiar with the area. So they have read the title, they feel intrigued, they want to read it, they read the abstract and feel that, the results look very good, want to read it. But they may not know the entire problem. So providing a context to know what the problem is about and what you're really trying to solve is very important. And that comes up in the introduction. Okay. And then you provide a general approach of how you have really solved the problem. Okay? You can say, okay, this is what the problem is about, what other researchers have done, not in very detail, because you do have a section for other research work or background work and so on. So there is a section for the background, so where you can go into a lot more detail, but do give some nuggets of what other researchers have taken and how your approach is different from others. And most important is the approach and the contributions that you've done. Because again, many people may not read beyond the introduction if it is not interesting. So trying to highlight your contributions one more time in the introduction is very important. Okay? And this also sets up the expectation for the rest of the paper. Okay. So the most important part in the introduction is you have to motivate the reader to continue reading. So again, this balance between specific enough and too specific has to be very clearly drawn. If you disclose everything in the introduction, reader is not going to read the paper. So try to watch out for that. Another generic mistake that people do is they just take the abstract and repeat that introduction section, or take the introduction section and write it in the abstract. No, introduction is not a summary. Introduction is an introduction to the problem statement, your approach, and the results you have achieved, and your contributions. Abstract is a summary of the entire paper. So keep these two in mind and don't try to repeat, because if a reader is reading the abstract and the same sentences are repeated in the introduction, they'll get turned off, right? So you want to make sure that you don't repeat these things. So last but not the least, what you need to remember is the introduction section asks the question, why you are working in this area, what is it that is important, why should the reader read your paper? That is what the introduction is going to talk about. Okay, it's just like introducing an individual, introducing a subject, whatever it is, right? The very first thing you do is just give a broad idea of who this is or what this is about, so that the audience is interested to listen and learn more. Okay? So sorry, I'm sticking back to some movie here, but basically whatever you want to say is what you kind of captured in your introduction. Okay. Any questions on this? Okay. If there are no questions, let's move on. See, one of the things to avoid is, in the introduction, many times you see one paragraph, which is like the table of contents kind of a thing. In section 2, I do this, section 3, I'm going to talk about this, 4, 5, 6. It's like a TOC. Why? I mean, it's important to kind of highlight how the paper is structured. The challenge with this approach is that it makes the reading very monotonous, right? On the other hand, you can be a little bit more creative. Again, this is where some level of, how do you break the monotony of, what you're writing. So you can try to be structuring the sentences a little differently. You may not always go 2, 3, 4, 5. You can say in section 4, I'm doing this while comparing with section 3, which is doing a different thing, and so on. So try to do a little bit of mix and match and makes the paper for interesting reading. Okay. The left side structure, you will see it very, very common. 90% of the papers follow the left side structure. The right side structure, you rarely see it, but when you see it, you feel really thrilled that, okay, hey, this is something that you want to read. Okay. Again, this is just my experience. And I'm sure, next time you read papers, you just see, try to see if people have written the structure in the left side way or the right side, and see how you feel a little bit more enthusiastic to read papers that are structured differently than the standard structure. Okay. Right. Now that we have done the title, abstract, introduction, now is the main part of the paper. Of course, you would have a background and literature survey and so on and so forth, depending on what the publication asks you to do. But now the main part of the paper is what your work. Right? Now there are questions that were asked. Right? First, obviously, this is the main part. This is where you have to shine yourself. You have to make sure that whatever you've done has to come out very strongly. So it is extremely clear what you're trying to say. Okay? Think in your mind, write it once, write it twice, write it thrice. You have to write it many times before you really get to the right thing, but be very, very clear. I typically try, like I said, nowadays people try to avoid the use of passive voice. Why? Passive voice makes it it makes it very formal. At the same time, it's a little impersonal. Active voice makes it a little bit more easier to read. Okay? And usually passive voice is a lot more longer sentences. So it becomes difficult to parse the sentence and figure out what exactly you're saying. Active voice makes it easier to comprehend. So this is why I would suggest writing in active voice, and nowadays that is the accepted norm as well. But whatever it is, whether you use active or passive, in a particular section in the paper, try to keep a consistent voice. So try to keep it like, don't try to mix and match active and passive in the same paragraph or same section. You may want to mix and match, saying that, okay, in the introduction, you will use passive. In the main part, you want to use active, you can do that. But if you're doing it, there has to be a reason for it, but try to, at least within a section, not try to keep changing the words. Having said that, I've also seen some very creative ways in which, the two, active and passive, can be brought together in a single paragraph within, two contrasting sentences, bring out the, the essence of what you're saying. For example, let's take this example here, right? So it says here, previous studies have established that, drawback increases. So this is a passive sentence. Immediately following that, you say, in this study, we investigated. So automatically kind of brings in an active word. So if you can bring out this kind of passive-active combination in a paragraph to bring out the contrast of what others have done and what you have done, if that contrast comes out very well, it's a very powerful way of expressing. It's a difficult task. So, but yeah, if you can get it, wonderful. Okay. Hope it answers some of the questions that were asked earlier, and I will move on. Okay. This is a few things that you need to keep in mind when you're trying to write your main part, right? Keep the sentences simple. Many times people try to write very, very longish sentences. Long sentences make it difficult for the reader to parse and figure out what you're saying. So keep the sentences simple. 5, 7, 8, 10 words. A sentence would probably be very meaningful. Strong, brief statements, they convey the right message, and they are most effective. In a paragraph, when you're writing multiple sentences, the following sentence should have some connection to the previous sentence. If you are expressing something which is completely out of context to the previous sentence, change the paragraph. Right? But within the paragraph, don't try to kind of mix a lot of ideas. It's a connection or a logical connection from the previous one to the next one to the next one and next one. And that's how you stitch together a story. Remember, you're telling a story, right? You're telling a story, there has to be some sequencing that happens. There is a connection from the first to the second to the third to the fourth sentence. Similarly in the paragraphs and so on, right? But once anything which you're saying a new thought, which is very different from what you're saying, change the paragraph and write it. Okay. Many times people also use a lot of parenthesized remarks, which is cutting and pasting text from what others have said. These make it hard for the reader to understand what you're saying. Okay. If you want to do those, there are footnotes available there you can use and try to kind of capture some of these things. The other thing that people do, which is possible to avoid, is use of filler words. So let's see some examples of what filler words are, right? So for example, some words like, completely, certainly, definitely, things like that, right? Not necessary, right? Most of the time this can be removed because the more words you use, the longer the sentence, harder it is to read. Again, these are just thumb rules, and sometimes you may have to use it, but more often than not, these are not necessary. For example, take some example in the first line, right? We absolutely agree with the theory and we agree with the theory. I mean, what is the difference between the two? Well, absolutely, really, it doesn't add a whole lot of value. I mean, if you agree with the theory, agree with the theory, right? By saying we absolutely agree with the theory has no really, I know sometimes it gives an emphasis, but in a research paper kind of a thing, it doesn't really add a whole lot of value. Right? So then sometimes we use the word due to the fact that, the phrase instead of just saying because, or things like, just restructuring the sentence. So due to the fact that we have limited, so there are some examples that I've given on the right side, let's kind of highlight that, right? A long sentence can be made very short. All you need to say is we must ration our daily intake. Hey, if that is the case, then the fact that we have limited resource, yes, because of limited resource, right? It's a very succinct, very clear, crisp message. It says why you must ration your intake, what is the challenge for why you're doing it, right? The cause and the effect is very clearly there, and you can capture it in a very short sentence. Okay. Sometimes you use word like, has the ability, it's important to note. Yeah, right, sometimes we say it is important to note. Why do you want to say that? Yes, I'm not saying that you never use it. Sometimes you may want to, if you have to draw attention to a particular fact, which is a non-obvious fact, you may want to kind of highlight saying, please note that, or it's important to note that. Sometimes you may want to use it, but more often than not, you don't need to use these words. Okay. Again, these are just guidelines. Use them as appropriate. Sometimes you may need to use it. So please use it judiciously where appropriate. Where it is not appropriate, try to avoid it. Your sentences become crisper, sentences become smaller, readability improves, and overall the quality of the paper improves. Okay. Now, once in the main paper, one of the key sections is your experimental results, right? It's very important to first talk about, when you present your experimental results, you talk about, what was the goal of the experiment? Why did you do the experiment? Is it in line with the theoretical statements you have made? You have some theoretical findings, right? You have maybe modeled something. You come up with a theory, and this experiment is trying to validate the assertions of the theory or validate the theory itself, right? So you have to kind of highlight, okay, why you did the experiment, and then how did you do it, and provide as much detail as you can so that the reader can, if required, replicate and or validate the result. Of course, you don't have to go down to a very small level detail saying, hey, you know what, I ran this experiment on a computer which was running Windows 10 version. You don't have to go down to that. But whatever is relevant that for the reader to go and validate or replicate the results, you try to capture it. Say if you used a particular tool, or if it's a performance simulation, you have to highlight how much memory was in the machine, or how many core processors were used, things like that. If it is a generic thing, it doesn't matter, then don't have to include. So, think about what needs to be included, what should not. Okay? And an experiment cannot be just run once. It's not a single data point. You always have to run the experiment multiple times so that you get statistical significance. Very important. Many times I've seen, people they come up with a theory and then they run it on, especially in the area of networks that I've seen. They create some ad hoc network of 3 nodes and 4 nodes and say that, oh, I ran this on 4 nodes. 4 nodes is not representative, right? your algorithm, whatever new thing that may come up, will work very well in a 4 node, but will it work in a 40 nodes? Will it work with 400 nodes? Is something very important. So many times those kind of, and how often you run that experiment. Just because it worked once doesn't mean that it is conclusive, right? Running it multiple times with different parameters, varying different parameters, will give you a better statistical signal. All these results have to be tabulated. And it is always better to use tables and graphs visually to make sure that it becomes easy to interpret the results. Use consistent units, have legends. All these are captions. All these are very important. And trust me, there are many publications where I get for reviews miss some of these fundamental things. You see an x-axis, you don't know what the reader is or writer is trying to say, what the researcher is trying to say, what units have they used. You see a y-axis, you don't know whether it's a log graph or it's a straight graph. So all these are very important. And if you run the experiment, having a statistical confidence, because you're not going to get identical result all the time. So having a statistical confidence or estimation of standard error is a very important part in any graph. So try to include all that. Okay. Most important is whatever is the result, there are some non-intuitive parts that have come up, right? If it was very intuitive, you don't have to say it. You don't have to say this graph is a straight line. If the reader can see that it's a straight line, you don't have to call it out. But if it is something non-intuitive, that you are expecting a particular, a graph to peak at particular value and it is not peaking there, it's peaking in another area, or it's peaking multiple times, these are non-intuitive results. So call those out and explain why it is non-intuitive and what your inferences and insights are from that. Yeah? Once you can do that, once you've done that, you'll be able to kind of get a very good set of section in the experimental field. Last but not the least, no matter what you do, your experiment is going to have some limitations. Explain those. Don't let the reader try to find out and guess, oh, this is a limitation. Call out, okay, whatever you have done is under this limitation. So if you've done a simulation, you can say it is a simulation. You don't have to say that, okay, this is happening in real life, because there may be many parameters that will influence in a real life. So what parameters you use, what values you take will have some set of limitations, kind of call out those limitations. So that's how you kind of present your experimental results. Any questions on this? And I've tried to give wherever possible links, and I will share this presentation for you to use later. So don't worry about that. I'll do that. Okay. Any questions on this before I?
Sir, one question from Saurav Day
Yeah.
again, and it is if I abbreviate a word in abstract session, should it be required to abbreviate in the word again in introduction and any other subsequent section part of the paper?
Okay. So try your best not, unless the abbreviation is very popular and well known, try not to use abbreviations in the abstract. Typically, the way you do it is, when the abbreviation is coming for the very first time, you kind of expand it, put the abbreviation in brackets, and subsequently start using the abbreviation. Yeah. And in the end, you would have a glossary section or whatever, and there you can have a table of all the abbreviations and their full expansion. Okay. So for example, if you're going to use ATM, whatever, automated teller machine, everybody knows about it. You don't have to kind of say ATM machine. You can use ATM machine if everybody knows what it is. But if it is very specific to your field, which people may not be familiar with, don't try your best not to use the abbreviation either in the title or in the abstract. Try not to. Okay. Again, this is just my personal preference. Sometimes it may be necessary, but by and large, usually, my experience has been that it is not necessary. Okay.
Yes, sir, that's the thing. I think the question is like we are following FFT, fast frequency transform. Fast Fourier transform. So FFT fast Fourier transform is specified in abstract, and also when it starts again the introduction section, we need to put again or not. That's the question.
Correct. Okay. So here's the way it is, right? FFT again. I'm just since I know about FFT, I'm assuming that it's a very common term. Then you don't have to expand. You can just say, I used FFT, right? But if you believe that, it's a term that is not common, try not to use, that word, use the expansion. And then, yes, in the introduction also, you're supposed to expand, because abstract is an abstract, right? If you expanded it, wonderful. But in the introduction is what you try to, or wherever the first usage, you try to expand. Okay. Abstract is not considered part of the paper. So whatever you do it in abstract, don't worry. In the paper, when you use it for the first time, expand and use the acronym in the section. At the end of the paper, you can give all the acronyms that, especially if your paper has lots of acronyms, try to capture all the acronyms in one end and try to give a full form of all of it. So it provides a reference material. So in case the reader comes across in section 3 somewhere or section 5, FFT, they can go to the last page, see what FFT stands for. It becomes easy for them to refer.
Okay, thank you, sir. Yeah, okay. And one more question. What should be the keywords?
Keyword.
They mentioned that what about the keyword selection or something? What should be the keywords?
Yeah. So the keyword selection is basically you have to use. So when again, it depends. It's a very contextual to the work that you do, right? So if you want a paper to show up when a particular keyword is typed, then use that keyword in the title and in the keyword section, right? When they say, okay, what keyword? See, keywords and other things are a reference to what this work is pertaining to. So for example, since you brought up FFT, if you're going to do a mathematical model and you're going to kind of use fast Fourier transform there, you can say fast Fourier transform is a keyword. So because the work is centered around FFT. But if FFT is just incidental, it may not be a keyword. So whatever is the central theme of paper, that goes into the keyword. Okay? All your contributions will be centered around a particular one or two themes, right? Those themes kind of go into the keyword. Sometimes people write a very large number of keywords. That also is not a very good idea in general. Keep it very brief. Have 3-4 keywords, which are the central themes, and that should cover your entire paper. And those should typically show up in the title somewhere as well.
Sir, is that depends upon the journals, what you are sending or something?
Yeah, it will. But most journals, see, if you write too many keywords, journals also frown upon it. So at the end of the day, it is for you to kind of express what your paper is. You know best what your paper is about. Okay. If all your work is centered around FFT, make sure that FFT comes in the keyword. But if work is not centered around FFT, if it is based on some Gaussian, some Gaussian transformation or something, right? Then use Gaussian transformation as the keyword, not FFT.
Yeah, right, sir. Yeah. Thank you. Is there any other questions from participants? You can unmute and ask, please.
Yeah.
Hello, sir. Am I audible, sir?
Yes.
Yeah, please. Yeah.
Yes, sir. Actually, it is regarding the keywords. Actually, whatever you mentioned, okay. But is it like that? It should not be included in title.
No. So what I was saying was, no. Whatever is there in the keyword, try to include in the title. Try to include so that, see, if your work is, let's take an example, right? If your work is related to Gaussian transformation or whatever, right? Then you want to use in the title, you have to bring that point because that is key of your. So you come up with some innovative way of doing Gaussian transformation, or your work is centered around how Gaussian transformation is applied to a particular problem. So you can kind of have a title like application of Gaussian transformation for that problem, right? So then Gaussian transformation is central to your theme. So bring it in the title and bring it in the keyword as well. So, irrespective of how people search, that word your paper will show up in the search. End of the day, you want your paper to get eyeballs, right? I mean, that's one of the objectives of writing a paper as well.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, so let me quickly move on. The last section in a paper is the conclusion. Again, just like the abstract summarizes, the conclusion also summarizes the paper. The only difference between abstract and conclusion is, in the conclusion, you're going to talk about all the key contributions and results. In the abstract, remember, you were not very, very specific. Why? Because you want the reader to go through the paper. In the conclusion, you can kind of highlight everything that you've done so that the At the end of the paper, the reader kind of comes to a conclusion section, understands what all has been done. It's like a summary of what the reader has read in the entire paper. Okay, specific insights and implications of the results. What is your implication? What does the result really mean? What is the significance of it? Has to come out very strongly in the conclusion as well. You would have obviously done it in the paper. In the conclusion, you can write 1 or 2 sentences about why this work is important. Remember, we talked about giving pointers to where other researchers can benefit. So you try to identify. Okay, if you applied, say again, I'm just using an abstract here, Gaussian transformation for a particular problem. You can say Gaussian transformation can also be used, or this work can be extended to further. You can give some ideas so that researchers who read your paper will also get some ideas of how to use your work and expand their horizon. Okay, and we all have done that, right? When we read other papers, you read, okay, what are the future area of work, and you go and apply that so that you can start working along. It's the same thing. Okay, and this is one last bullet that I've mentioned here is an important piece, right? Based on whatever work you've done, you've drawn a very specific conclusion. But a reader may draw a separate conclusion, right? So you always try to be open to other inferences. It is not that, your inference is the only way it can be interpreted. Many times there is enough of leeway to interpret your results differently. So if your work is such that, it is open to interpretation, keep the conclusion while you keep it specific, keep it open to other possibilities. So you can kind of make it a little bit, what is the right word? Don't go very harsh and hard. Okay? You cannot say this is the best way of doing things. Okay? Say this is one way of doing things. It has given promising results. There are other ways to do it, or this is one way of interpreting the result. But maybe there is another way. You believe that it's one way of, but you cannot conclusively say that, right? Keep it specific, what your conclusions are, what your thoughts are, but be open to another way of interpreting the same thing. Because at the end of the day, you are interpreting based on certain experiments remember, we talked about limitations and all that. So your inferences are based on that. So keep it open that there may be other inferences. This is a very important part to remember when you write the conclusions. Okay. So just to quickly summarize what you have done, we have talked about, how to write a title, how to write the abstract, the introduction, the main part, explaining the results, the experimental results, and finally writing the conclusion. So if you kind of follow these steps, more often than not, your paper would turn out to be something meaningful. Of course, none of these can compensate for, if the research work is not sufficient, none of these will compensate. I am first assuming that whatever work you've done is significant enough for you to write a paper. Only then all these things make sense. If your work is insignificant, writing a good summary or whatever will really not give you a whole lot of, the paper cannot improve on poor quality work. Paper will improve only when your work is already there. How do you present it so that you get noticed and your papers don't get rejected? That's the whole objective. Okay. Now, let me not talk about presentation. So let me just quickly summarize. Okay. So obviously, like I said, writing a research paper is an art, can be mastered, definitely mastered with practice. Okay. When you write, I've given you some pointers on what to pay attention to. Okay. Some things will stay in your mind. Pay attention to it when next time you write or read a paper. See if the authors are following that kind of a pattern, and if they are, that reinforces when you write a paper as well. Writing improves when you read more. Okay, the more you read, the better your writing, because you capture all nuggets of how others are expressing ideas, so that subconsciously comes into your writing. So read extensively, especially if you are doing research. Read a paper, very, very free, as many papers as you can. One of the important things that I tell most is, in today's world, when you have tools available for spellings and grammar, try not to have any spelling mistakes or grammatically incorrect statements. It is absolutely a big irritant. And in today's world, there is no reason for you to do it. There are enough tools available that you can use, including simple Microsoft Word or whatever can give you a lot of this. So please, when you submit a paper with spelling and grammatical errors, all it tells you is that you are being a very casual researcher, not paying attention, right? Try to not create that kind of an image. Be a little bit more. Spend 5 minutes, 10 minutes. You'll get a much better output. The other one that I typically tell people is that, you always want to, once you've written your paper doesn't get written, first version is never the best version. You have to write it again and again and again. Sometimes it goes to 10, 12 iterations before you are satisfied. Have somebody who doesn't know about your work to read it so that they can give you valuable suggestions from a very different perspective. Going back to your research guide and asking the research guide to kind of read it will not give you that many. Again, I'm not commenting on the reason for it, because the research guide and you are fully vested in the same thought process, right? You're thinking along the same lines. So the research guide may not be able to give you a different perspective. Having somebody who can read your paper and give you suggestions from a different perspective is very important to improve the quality of the paper. And many times people get offended, when people comment about the paper, right? Be open to criticism. It's okay. You will never, all of us learn, right? We all make mistakes. There is always a way to improve, right? So as long as you're open to criticism and take it positively, and not everything that everybody says has to be incorporated, right? You take it, if people say 10 things, maybe 5 things make sense, 5 things don't. Take the 5 things that make sense and incorporate, but be open to criticism. Okay? Last, this is very important. If you are passionate about your work, it automatically shows through your paper. Okay? When you do a presentation of the paper, as well as when you write, your passion shows. So if you're passionate about it, the results will automatically happen. More often than not, people who are not passionate, they do write the paper because it's been given as a assignment, as a chore. Right? Then that passion, if you don't have the passion, it shows in the paper. Okay, I am telling you this having read a lot of papers and written some myself. When I'm not passionate, the quality of the paper is very, very lackluster. When I'm very passionate, the way I write it, the way the paper comes across expressing my passion. Okay? And that's a very important part of the entire research. So this is all I had to say. Happy to, we have another 15 minutes. Happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. One more question is in chat box. Yeah. So does publishing of papers in good journal give an edge in IT industry?
See, publishing a paper in a good journal, it's not just IT industry. It is useful in, see, why do you write a paper? Okay, let's come to the very, very simple thing. We started, when I started the session, right? We talked about, why do you write a paper? Maybe we should go back. So let's go back. Why write a research? These are some of the reasons why you want to write a research, right? Now, if these are some of the reasons why you want to write a research paper, then it has to, one of these objectives have to be met. Okay. Don't worry about whether it is valuable or not. You write a research paper because you want to share something back to the public, right? Or you want to build a community of like-minded individuals, whatever be the motivation. If the motivation is not there, writing a paper or publishing a paper has no value. You need to, that's what I'm saying. The objective of the paper should not be measured by, hey, it will help me to find a better job. Yeah, maybe it does, but more important is you have something, you've done some interesting work, you want to share with the community, and you want to be recognized as an expert in that area. So if these are the motivations, yes, definitely write that. But if these are not the motivation, you're writing it because, it's like mandated or something which is, thrust upon you, trust me, the quality of the paper will not show. This is just my personal opinion. Okay. Any further questions?
Sir, Saurav has one more question. Yeah. Are there any limits of citing references? Do the selection of latest reference have some additional advantages?
So if you are working in an active area of research, having references which are more recent is important. Okay. Because if you have references which are very old, that means you have not kept track of the latest advances in the field. Right? So for example, if you're working on, again, let me take the star twinkle. Right? Star twinkling probably has been an area of research 100 years ago or whatever, right? Or maybe even 500 years ago. Then it doesn't make sense. But if there are people, if it's an area where people are working today, it's better to have references which are very, very current, so that you know, and you are also expressing their opinion, that you are aware of what has happened, and you have furthered that research to See, research at the end of the day is your original work, right? It is not a copy of somebody else's book. So unless you are aware of what others are doing, your work cannot be considered original. So if you know that, okay, in 2021, all this research has happened and you're writing a paper in 2022, you know that, okay, you are one step above the what others have done. If your reference is from 2010 and 2012, right, in 8-9 years, there's a lot of work that must have happened which you would have missed out. So references should typically have a lot of it which is current, which is in the last 2-3 years, which kind of gives, yes, there will always be some references which are old. One point about references, since the question was, how many references should be there, right? Don't have reference for the sake of reference. Okay. The reference that you put has to be somewhere in the text, it has to be referred to. Some people do this. Again, this is a very common thing that people do. They put 25 references, but they must be referring only 10 of them in the paper. Why have that additional 15? Right? No point. If you're referring to something, it has to have a relevance in the paper. It must be referring to it, saying that, okay, what have you picked from that reference? Some people put a lot of textbooks. If you're putting a textbook, unless there is a chapter from the textbook that is being relevant, you can even put, saying chapter 5 of that textbook, rather than saying, this textbook. Okay. So try to be more specific in the references as well. So what is it that you picked? Because textbooks run through 200, 300 pages, right? You may not have picked everything from there. So try to be more specific.
So, can we move on to next question?
Yeah, please.
Yeah. Okay. One more question is there. What is the typical maximum limit for the percentage of self-plagiarism in a typical academic paper?
Okay. This is a very often asked question. Okay?
Yeah.
And again, it varies. See, try your best not to copy, just like any other. Don't want to copy verbatim somebody else's work, even your own work. If it has already been published, try not to copy exactly verbatim things. Yes, you can summarize in your own words your findings. You can write them. Okay, you can include them, just like you would use other researchers' work. The way you express it the same way. But for example, say you have some experimental results that you've already published. Taking the same experimental results and then cut, paste, and copying it again in a new work is not acceptable. Okay? Yeah, if there is a finding from it that you want to summarize and say, in a prior work a year ago, this was the finding, and now, things have improved or whatever, you have done more work and you have better results to share, please do. Because your prior work is it's a context to the current work. Yes, definitely. But if you want to take the entire section, subsections, writing style, everything, verbatim from the previous work into the current work, that is usually frowned upon. While some people say that at the end of the day, it is my work, so I can include it, but still, if it is published, it is frowned upon in general. I know it's a little vague, but see, there's a lot of subjectivity to many of these things.
And one more question from Swati Krishna from NITC. Yeah, sure. If we are modifying an algorithm given in a paper or borrowing a structure of an algorithm from another paper or something, is there a need of citing that paper or
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You have to, right? If you're taking an algorithm from a paper that was published, let's say in 2050, right? Yes, you have to say that this was the work that was there and how you have modified them. You can just say, very simplistically, you can say, so-and-so algorithm was published by this author in this. It achieved this, but why you have modified it or what modifications you have done? Because the end of the day, why are you modifying? You have to get a better result from what the author has used, right? The previous author. So use that as a reference and say, their work you built on top of somebody else's work. Refer to that paper and you build. Think about it the other way around. If you have done some work and somebody is going to take your algorithm and tweak it, modify it, and if they don't refer to your work, would you feel offended or not? You will, right? So same thing. Just refer to the other paper and say they have done this. And that also kind of tells you that you have done your reading and you're not, you are aware of what other researchers have done and how your work is different from the other research. See, most of the time people refrain from doing it just because the work is not significant. Then all these tricks people do. So as long as your work is significant, you can go refer to other people's work. There's no problem.
Okay, sir. I have one more questions to add. There is no other questions in chat box now.
Okay.
And one more question I have to add is that what about these collaborative papers and also in new gen papers and all? So what is the difference that will make in the writing pattern?
Yeah. See, collaborative paper is basically, rather than authors coming from the same university, college, whatever, you are now collaborating with somebody from a different college or a different, it could be an industry as well, right? The advantage is that you are bringing in different perspectives, right? Say, for example, if you are bringing 2 or 3 different thought process, and collaboratively, especially if they are eminent researchers, the quality of the paper improves significantly when you collaborate. Okay. See, the research community, academic community is a very open community. People don't typically try to hide. They are very open about publishing their work, sharing their work, and so on. In that interest, when you do collaborative work, right, you get to learn a lot. And the quality, generally, my observation is when people from different institutes work together, the quality of the paper is usually much, much better because different thought processes have come in, different approaches are coming, and the best approach kind of gets captured in the paper. Different way of thinking, different style of writing, a lot of things kind of get captured and it comes up. Of course, all this is when the collaboration is healthy. Sometimes collaboration also gets nasty, but I'm assuming that when you're talking about collaborative work, you're talking about healthy collaboration. Definitely very, very useful.
And one more thing, sir. When we write a paper, some guides or mentors opposing that don't write we or us in that sentences and all. And few makes in some papers, successfully submitted papers, they are representing the we or something. They are designated in introduction part or something. How much you feel about that?
Okay. So my general thought is, usually very rare that you will have a single author paper. It's always a multiple author, right? It's a good idea to use we. If you're writing it in active voice, it's a good idea to use we. Right? Even in single author paper, it is always, while the author may be one, they may have definitely, used facilities from, the institute, right? So all that. So it's a representation of the institute as well. It's always a good idea, in my view, to use we instead of I, right? When you're writing it active voice. So we, us, that kind of a thing. Right? When you're writing in passive voice, obviously these things don't come up because you just say that, this research was done at NIT Calicut, right? Rather than saying, we did this work in NIT Calicut. So when you write it in passive voice, that goes away. That's why I said passive voice usually brings in an impersonal or formal tone. So if you want to avoid using we, you can use a passive voice to get out of that. So again, there's a lot that you can judiciously use or not use, but this has been my suggestion that if you're using an active voice, please use we, not I.
Yes. Right, sir. Thank you. And is there any other questions from participants? We are now out of time.
Almost there.
Yeah,
of course. And my email address is here. Feel free to write to me if you have any questions. I'll be happy to. Trust me, I'll respond back for sure. If you have any questions, so if you didn't get a time to ask now, please do write, and I will definitely answer the query back. Of course, I may not respond immediately, but definitely I will definitely respond.
Yeah, thank you, sir.
And I will send Rahul. I will send you the decks,
sure, sir,
the slides.
I will share to the participants. Sure.
Please. Yeah.
And one feedback form is put in the chat box, and you can fill. And we need your collective feedbacks and thank you.
Yeah.
And
so if you can share the feedback with me, that will be useful. It will always
sure. We will send the feedback.
I'll also learn from it. What worked, what didn't work, so that the next time around I can improve.
Yes. And as on behalf of IEEE PES student chapter NITC, and I need to express thanks to our speaker Venkatesan, and who, in spite of his busy schedule, and spend his valuable time for us by accepting our invitation to handle this session. And thanks for enlightening us, sir, sharing your knowledge and experience, and also valuable knowledge in writing patterns are also in research papers. Thank you, thanks, sir. Thanks a lot, and thank you for all the participants to attend. And thank you, thanks a lot. Thanks everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Bye bye.
Bye.